You probably think Thanksgiving is for gratitude, not us. For my family, it is the day for budget allocation, and I am usually the budget. My sister toasted her pregnancy like an Oscar win, then announced I was buying her a bigger house. Mom clapped while Dad just nodded. She handed me keys like a wedding favor. The problem was that I had my own keys, and I had already used them before she even realized she was homeless. My name is Colette Murphy. I am 34 years old, and as I sat at the mahogany dining table that I had paid for, inside the 3,000 square foot house that I had paid for, eating the turkey that I had paid for, I realized I had become a ghost in my own life. The house was located in a manicured suburb just 20 minutes outside of Denver. We called it the family home, a term that suggested communal ownership and shared history. In reality, it was a stage, and my older sister, Tessa, was the director, the lead actress, and the primary critic. The air inside was thick with the scent of roasted sage and expensive perfume, the kind that masks the underlying smell of old resentment. I looked around the table. It was not just family today. It never was. Tessa had curated the guest list with the precision of a war general planning a siege. There were 22 people squeezed into the dining room. There was the pastor from my mother's church, a man who always preached about charity while eating the most expensive cut of meat. There were the neighbors from 2 doors down, the Millers, who loved gossip more than they loved their own grandchildren. There were 3 of Tessa's friends from her Pilates class, women who looked at me with the pity one reserves for a stray dog that has wandered into a country club. They were witnesses. I knew this because I knew how my sister operated. She never launched a missile without an audience to applaud the explosion. I sat at the far end of the table, near the kids' section. My name card was written in calligraphy, but they had spelled Colette with 1 L instead of 2. It was a small, passive-aggressive error, the kind that was easy to dismiss as a mistake, but felt like a paper cut to the soul. I took a sip of water and waited. The envelope in the inside pocket of my blazer felt heavy. A brick of paper resting against my ribs. It was the only thing keeping me upright. Tessa stood up. The room quieted down immediately. My sister had that effect on people. She was glowing, her skin perfect, her dress a shade of deep emerald that highlighted her eyes. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture so theatrical it belonged on a soap opera set. Beside her, Gavin, her fiancé, stood up as well. He looked like he had just won a prize at a carnival, smug and slightly vacant. "I have an announcement," Tessa said. Her voice trembled with practiced emotion. "Gavin and I have been praying for a sign, and we received a miracle." My mother, Darlene, clasped her hands together under her chin. Her eyes were already wet. She knew what was coming. She always knew. The script had been rehearsed in private phone calls that I was never part of. "We went to the doctor yesterday," Tessa continued, scanning the room to ensure every eye was fixed on her. "And we found out that we are not just having 1 baby, we are having triplets." The room erupted. It was a wall of sound. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood up to clap. The Millers gasped. The pastor shouted a praise to the heavens. My mother let out a sob that sounded more like a wail of ecstasy. My father, Gordon, stood up and hugged Gavin, slapping him on the back with a vigor I had not seen in him for years. 3 blessings, my mother cried out. 3 grandbabies. I stayed seated. I clapped. Because that was what you did. I smiled. Because that was the mask I had worn for 2 decades. But my eyes were locked on Tessa. She was soaking it in, basking in the adoration. But I saw the flicker in her gaze. She was checking to see if I was watching. This was not just about the babies. This was the setup. The hook had been baited. Now came the pull. Tessa raised her glass of sparkling cider to quiet the room. It took a full minute for the noise to die down. She looked down the table, straight at me. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by a sharp, calculating look that I knew better than my own reflection. "But with 3 babies," Tessa said, her voice dropping to a serious, responsible tone, "this house is just going to be too small. We are already tight on space, and the nursery cannot hold 3 cribs." She paused for effect. The room held its breath. "So," she said, flashing a smile that was all teeth, "Colette is going to buy us a bigger house." It was not a question. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no. The reaction was immediate and nauseating. My mother turned to me, beaming, clapping her hands together as if I had just performed a magic trick. "Oh, Colette, that is wonderful, a fresh start for the babies." My father nodded at me, a solemn, approving nod. "Good girl," he mouthed. It was the same look he gave me when I paid his medical bills, or when I covered the property tax. It was the look of a man signing off on a transaction he felt entitled to. Gavin laughed, a short, barking sound. "I will send you the Zillow links tonight. Colette, we saw a place over in Cherry Creek, 5 bedrooms, heated floors. It is perfect." The neighbors looked at me with newfound respect. To them, I was no longer the quiet sister in the corner. I was the financier. I was the golden goose. They smiled, thinking how sweet it was, how lucky Tessa was to have a sister who did well for herself. Tessa reached into her purse and pulled out a ring of keys. They were the keys to this house. She slid them down the table. They clattered across the wood, spinning past the gravy boat and the cranberry sauce, stopping just inches from my water glass. "You can start looking this week," Tessa said. "We need at least 4 bedrooms. A big yard is non-negotiable, and it has to be close to Mom. We need the support system." I stared at the keys. The metal glinted under the chandelier light. For 34 years, I had been the fix. I was the one who smoothed things over. I was the one who worked 60-hour weeks to build a career while Tessa built a social following. I was the one who lived in a 600-square-foot apartment in the city while paying the mortgage on this 4-bedroom suburban dream so my parents could retire in comfort and my sister could play house. I looked at my mother. She was already talking to the woman next to her about nursery colors. She did not even wait for my answer. My consent was assumed. It was irrelevant. I looked at my father. He was cutting his turkey, unbothered. I looked at Tessa. She was triumphant. She thought she had trapped me. She thought that by doing this in front of the church, in front of the neighbors, in front of the family, she had removed my ability to refuse. She thought shame would be her enforcer if I said no. I would be the monster who denied shelter to triplets. I would be the greedy, selfish spinster sister who hoarded her money while her family suffered. It was a brilliant trap, truly. But she had made one fatal error. She assumed I was still playing the same game. I reached out and placed my hand over the keys. The cold metal bit into my palm. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the turkey and the lies. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. It did not pitch up. It was flat, calm, and terrifyingly polite. Tessa beamed. "I knew you would be excited. We can go look on Saturday. I have a list of—" "Actually," I said, cutting her off. I did not raise my voice, but the sharpness of the word acted like a blade. "I have already found a house." Tessa froze. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, brighter than before. "You did, oh my God. Colette, you work fast. Where is it? Is it the one on Highland Drive? I saw that one listed." Gavin leaned forward, his eyes greedy. "Does it have a 3-car garage? I need space for the project car." My mother clapped again. "See, I told you Colette would take care of it." I looked at them. I looked at each of them, memorizing their faces. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember the exact shape of their entitlement. "It is a beautiful house," I said. "It has a library. It has a garden. It is quiet." "Show us pictures," Tessa demanded. Reaching for my phone, I moved my hand away. "It is not for you," I said. The silence that followed was different. It was not the respectful silence of an audience waiting for a speech. It was the confused, jagged silence of a record scratching. "What?" Tessa laughed. but the sound was brittle. What do you mean? I found a house, I repeated, enunciating every syllable. For me, I bought it yesterday. I move tomorrow. My mother's smile slid off her face like wax melting near a flame. Colette, what are you talking about? Your sister is having triplets. She needs space. She does, I agreed, and she should probably start looking for it. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the envelope. It was thick with documents: the deed, the mortgage statement, the transfer of utilities, and the eviction notice. I placed it on the table with a heavy, deliberate thud. It landed right next to the pumpkin pie. Also, I said, my voice dropping an octave, turning into something made of stone. The house you are all sitting in right now, the one you want to upgrade, it is not available for that. Colette, stop joking, my father said, his voice gruff. This is not the time. I am not joking, I said. This house is being sold. I signed the listing agreement this morning. The sign goes up in the yard on Monday. Tessa stood up so fast her chair tipped over backward and crashed onto the floor. You cannot do that. This is our house. Mom and Dad live here. Mom and Dad live here, I corrected her. But I own it. I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. I pay for the roof repairs and the plumbing and the landscaping. And for 2 years, I have let you pretend it is yours. I pushed the envelope toward the center of the table. That ends today. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The guests were frozen. The pastor had his fork halfway to his mouth. The Millers were staring at me with their mouths slightly open. They had come for a celebration, and instead, they were watching an execution. Gavin looked at the envelope, then at me. You are kicking out pregnant triplets. I am selling my asset, I said. What you do with your triplets is your responsibility. You are the father. Provide for them. My mother let out a sharp gasp. Colette, how dare you speak to him like that? I am done speaking, I said. I looked across the table. Past the shock and the horror and the rising anger, I looked for the one person in the room who I knew would understand. Darlene's sister, my Aunt June. She was sitting near the window, nursing a glass of red wine. June was the black sheep of the family, mostly because she refused to lie to make people feel better. She had been watching the entire scene with narrowed eyes, her face unreadable. Aunt June, I said. My voice softened just a fraction. She looked up, locking eyes with me. She did not look surprised. She looked resigned. Would you mind reading this for the room? I asked, gesturing to the envelope. I think they need an impartial narrator. My voice seems to be causing some confusion. June stood up slowly. She was a tall woman, imposing in a way my mother never was. She walked over to the table, the heels of her boots clicking against the hardwood floor. She picked up the envelope. She weighed it in her hand for a second, looking at Tessa, then at my parents. Well, June said. Her voice was dry, raspy from years of smoking, and completely devoid of pity. Let us see what we have here. She ripped the envelope open. The sound of tearing paper was the loudest thing in the world. Tessa stepped back, her hands covering her mouth, as if the paper contained a bomb. In a way, it did. And I had just lit the fuse. The silence in the dining room was not empty. It was heavy, packed tight with 34 years of history that I had dragged behind me like a wedding train made of lead. While Aunt June fumbled with the flap of the envelope, tearing through the paper seal, my mind did not stay in the room. It drifted backward, sliding through the timeline of my life to find the breadcrumbs that had led me to this moment. People like to believe that families break in a single moment, like a dropped vase, but they do not. They erode, like a cliff face battered by the ocean, grain by sand grain, until one day the whole shelf collapses into the sea. I looked at the birthday cake sitting untouched on the sidebar. It was a triple chocolate ganache, Tessa's favorite. It reminded me of the rule that had governed my entire existence, the rule of the shared birthday. Tessa and I were born 2 years and 4 days apart. In any other family, this would be a coincidence. In the Murphy household, it was a logistical strategy. For 18 years, we never had separate parties. We had the girls' celebration. It sounded efficient. It felt like erasure. I remembered my 10th birthday. I had asked for a science kit and a strawberry cake. Tessa, turning 12, wanted a karaoke machine and vanilla with sprinkles. When the day came, the living room was draped in pink streamers, Tessa's choice. The music blasting was Pop Hits, Tessa's playlist. And when my mother brought out the sheet cake from the grocery store, I saw the icing script written in bright gel. Happy birthday, Tessa. And then, squeezed into the bottom right corner in a font half the size, almost as an afterthought, Colette, the cake was vanilla. When I had looked at my mother, eyes burning with the specific, hot tears of a neglected child, she had just squeezed my shoulder. Her voice was a soft, frantic whisper, the sound of a woman trying to keep a lid on a boiling pot. Be flexible, Colette, she had said. Your sister is at a difficult age. She needs this to feel special. Do not make a scene. You are the easy one. Remember, be the easy one. I ate the vanilla cake. I smiled for the photos. I became the easy one. I learned then that flexibility was just a fancy word for breaking your own bones to fit into someone else's box. That dynamic did not vanish with puberty. It just became more expensive. I remembered the spring of my senior year of high school. I had spent 4 years grinding, taking advanced placement classes, editing the school paper, and staying up until 2 a.m. to perfect essays. I wanted out. I wanted a university that was far enough away that I would have to take a plane, not a car, to visit. I received a partial scholarship to a university in Boston. It was $5,000 a semester, not a full ride, but enough to make the dream possible. I brought the letter to the dinner table, placing it next to the pot roast with a trembling hand. I waited for the pride. I waited for my father to clap me on the shoulder, for my mother to cry happy tears. My father read the letter. He did music the math in his head, his lips moving silently. Then he looked up, not at me, but at Tessa, who was sitting across the table texting under a napkin. Tessa had barely graduated. She had no plan, no savings, and a vague ambition to be discovered. This is great, Colette, my father said, his voice practical, devoid of celebration. This $5,000 you are saving us, this covers the gap for Tessa. I blinked, confused. What gap? Tessa wants to go to that fashion merchandising program at the community college, he explained, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. We were short on the tuition and the car insurance she needs to commute. But since you have this scholarship, we can shift the funds. You are covering yourself, so the family fund can go to her. I felt the air leave my lungs. But Dad, I still need money for housing, for books. That scholarship only covers tuition. You will figure it out, he said, stabbing a carrot with his fork. You always do. You are the smart one. Tessa needs the help. She is not like you. She is not like you. That was the currency of our household. My competence was the penalty tax I paid to subsidize her mediocrity. Because I could survive without help, I was given none. Because Tessa refused to survive without help, she was given everything. I ended up taking 2 jobs in the cafeteria and the library to pay for my life in Boston. Tessa dropped out of the fashion program after 6 months because the morning classes were too early, but she kept the car. As we grew into adulthood, the theft shifted from money to reality. I built a career out of understanding money. I started a blog, then a podcast, and eventually a streaming channel focused on financial literacy for women. I taught people how to budget, how to invest, how to spot financial abuse. It was ironic, really. I was teaching thousands of strangers how to protect themselves from people like my family. My income grew. I crossed the 6-figure mark, then double that. I bought a new car. I wore tailored suits. I carried myself with the assurance of someone who had built a castle out of her own sweat. To my family, however, my career was a cute internet thing. So, Are you still doing your little radio show? Tessa would ask at Christmas, usually right before asking me to pay for the wine run. It is a podcast, Tessa, I would say. And we just signed a sponsorship deal with a major bank. She would wave her hand, dismissing it. Right, influencer stuff. I just think it is so risky. Colette, you do not have a real job with benefits. It must be so unstable. I worry about you. She said this while working 12 hours a week as a receptionist at a yoga studio, living in an apartment my parents subsidized. The gaslighting was masterful. If I bought a nice purse, I was showing off. If I refused to lend her $500 for a concert ticket, I was stingy and forgot where I came from. They created a narrative where my success was actually a character flaw, a sign that I had become cold and detached, while Tessa's constant state of financial emergency was a sign of her authentic artistic spirit. My mother was the architect of this piece. She did not demand money from me directly. She brokered it. She was the diplomat of dysfunction. Colette, honey, she would whisper in the kitchen while I chopped vegetables. I know Tessa was rude to you, but you have to understand, she is under so much pressure. Gavin is between jobs again. She looks at you and she feels inadequate. When she makes those jokes, it is just her defense mechanism. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. The adult version of be the easy one. And I swallowed the insults. When Tessa made a toast at my 30th birthday and joked that Colette is married to her bank account because no man can handle her spreadsheet energy, I laughed. I laughed because if I didn't, I would be the humorless witch. I laughed because the guests were watching. I laughed because I had been trained to de-escalate Tessa's aggression by absorbing it. But the real turning point, the moment the hook truly sank in, was 2 years ago. My father's health collapsed. It was a heart scare, followed by a long, terrifying recovery. He could not work. The medical bills were piling up on the counter like snowdrifts. My mother was shrinking inside her clothes, her eyes wide with a panic she tried to hide. Tessa, of course, made it about her. I cannot believe this is happening, she cried in the hospital waiting room. My rent is going up next month. How am I supposed to ask Dad for help when he's hooked up to these machines? I looked at my father, pale and gray in the hospital bed. I looked at my mother, who was trembling, and I did the math. I had the money. I had the credit score. I could fix this. We need to consolidate, my mother had said, her voice trembling. We need a place where we can all be, a hub. We can sell the old house. But we need something bigger if we are going to take care of your father. And Tessa, well, she can move in to help. To help. That was the lie we all agreed to tell. I will buy the house, I told them. I will put down the deposit. I will cover the closing costs. I will carry the mortgage until Dad gets his pension sorted out. I saw the relief wash over them. It was physical. My mother hugged me so hard I lost my breath. My father squeezed my hand. Even Tessa looked at me with something approaching gratitude. You are a lifesaver, Colette, my mother said. Just for a little while, just until we get back on our feet. You put it in your name for now, to keep things simple with the bank, and we will pay you back. We will handle the monthly payments once we are settled. I believed them, or rather, I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that this time, my money was buying love, not just silence. I bought the house. I paid 20% down. I moved them in. And then, I watched as I was slowly evicted from my own generosity. Tessa took the master suite because she needed the bathtub for her anxiety. My parents took the downstairs suite. I was left with the guest room, which I barely used because I preferred my quiet apartment in the city. Within 3 months, the family hub became Tessa's domain. She redecorated the living room without asking me, charging the furniture to a credit card she assumed I would pay off. She hosted parties. She posted videos on social media referring to my home and my renovation projects. When I came over to visit, I felt like an intruder. Oh, you are coming for dinner, Tessa would say on the phone, sounding put out. Okay, well, can you pick up takeout? We are low on groceries. The monthly payments from my parents never materialized. First, it was Dad's medication is expensive. Then it was, the heating bill was a shock. Then it was, Tessa needs a new car to drive Dad to therapy. I paid the mortgage. I paid the insurance. I paid the utilities. And in return, I got exclusion. I realized the truth on a Tuesday afternoon. 3 months ago, I had come over to drop off some paperwork for my father. I walked in the back door, which was unlocked. They were in the kitchen, Mom, Dad, Tessa, and Gavin. They were laughing. They were eating takeout sushi from the expensive place in town. I stood in the hallway, unseen. Colette is annoying about the thermostat, Tessa was saying, popping a piece of tuna into her mouth. She texted me again about keeping it at 72, like, relax, you are not even here. She just worries about the bill, my mother said soothingly. You know how she is with money, obsessive. It is greedy is what it is, Gavin said. She makes so much. Why does she care if the electric bill is high? She should be happy to help her family. She is just lonely, my father said. His voice was not kind. It was dismissive. She has nothing else but her accounts. Let her pay. It gives her a purpose. It gives her a purpose. I stood there, freezing cold in the hallway of the house I owned. They did not hate me. Hate requires passion. Hate requires acknowledging the other person as a human being. They did not see me as a human being. They saw me as a utility. I was no different to them than the water heater or the Wi-Fi router. I was a functional appliance that existed to make their lives comfortable. When I worked, they ignored me. When I malfunctioned, when I asked for boundaries or respect, they kicked me until I started working again. It was not a storm that would pass. It was the climate. It was the weather of my life. And I had spent 34 years standing in the rain, waiting for the sun, when I should have just built a roof. I backed out of the hallway. I walked out the door. I got into my car and drove away. That was the day I stopped being the daughter. That was the day I became the landlord. I hired the lawyer the next morning. I started recording the calls. I stopped asking for permission. And now, sitting at this Thanksgiving table, watching Aunt June unfold the paper that proved I was a person, not an appliance, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was the feeling of the weather finally changing. To understand the explosion at the Thanksgiving table, you have to look at the fuse. And in my family, the fuse was not made of gunpowder. It was made of bank transfers, promissory notes, and a silence that cost me roughly $3,800 a month. It started exactly 24 months ago. My career had just hit a new stratosphere. I had signed a 3-year exclusive content partnership with Crown Ridge Media Group. It was the kind of contract that changes your life. It meant a base salary that made my eyes water, plus revenue sharing on my streaming numbers. For the first time in my life, I was not just stable, I was wealthy. I made the mistake of telling my mother. I remember the phone call. It was a Tuesday. I told her about the Crown Ridge deal because I wanted her to be proud. I wanted her to say, "Good job, Colette." Instead, there was a pause on the line, a silence that I now recognize as the sound of a calculator clicking in her head. "That is wonderful, honey," she said. "God really provides when the need is greatest." The need, as it turned out, was immediate. 2 weeks later, the family crisis meeting was called. My father's heart condition had flared up, requiring a specialized treatment plan that insurance was fighting. At the same time, Tessa's landlord had raised the rent on her duplex by $400 a month. She called it price gouging. I called it market rate, but I kept that to myself. We gathered in my parents' old living room. My mother served tea and laid out the vision. "We need to consolidate," she said, using a word she had definitely learned from my podcast. "We are bleeding money keeping 2 households running. The doctors say your father needs a stable, stress-free environment. And Tessa, well, she needs help with the baby on the way." This was before the triplets. This was when she was pregnant with her first, a pregnancy that ended in a miscarriage a few months later. But at the time, it was the leverage they needed. We found a house. Gavin said, sliding a printed listing across the coffee table. It is perfect. 4 bedrooms, a mother-in-law suite on the ground floor for your parents, a big yard. It could be the family hub. The family hub. It sounded so wholesome, a place where generations mixed, where support was built into the walls. The problem is the financing, my father said. Looking at the floor, my credit took a hit with the medical bills last year, and Gavin's freelance work. Banks do not like the inconsistency. They all turn to look at me. We just need a bridge, my mother said, reaching out to touch my knee. Just someone to stand on the mortgage temporarily. We will sell this place, use the equity to pay you back the down payment, and then refinance the loan into our names once Dad's pension kicks in and Gavin gets his promotion. You would just be the name on the paper. Colette, we will pay the monthly costs. I looked at the numbers. The house was $650,000. They needed 20% down to avoid mortgage insurance. That was $130,000, plus closing costs. I can do the down payment, I said slowly. As a loan, with interest. Of course, Tessa chirped. We will write up a contract and everything. It will be strictly business. It was never business. I wired $142,000 the next week, covering the down payment and the closing costs. I signed the 30-year fixed mortgage. I signed the deed. I became the legal owner of 42 Oak Creek Lane. You are saving us, my mother whispered when I handed her the keys. This is your house too. You know, your room is the one upstairs with the bay window. I never slept in that room. I stayed in my apartment in the city, a sleek, 1-bedroom sanctuary that smelled like espresso and silence. I told myself it was because I needed to be close to the Crown Ridge studios. The truth was, I knew that if I moved into the hub, I would become the maid. For the first 2 months, things were quiet. Then the drift began. The first month, my mother transferred the full mortgage amount. The second month, it was short by $500. It is the moving costs, she texted me. We'll make it up next month. She did not make it up. The third month, the payment was short by $1,000. Dad's new medication is not covered, she explained on the phone, her voice thick with stress. It is $600 out of pocket, and Tessa had to go to the emergency room for dehydration. We are just a little tight. You understand, right? I understood. I covered the difference. By month 6, the payments from them had stopped completely. The narrative shifted. It was no longer a loan. It was a contribution. You are doing so well with Crown Ridge, Tessa said during a Sunday dinner, waving her fork. I saw your subscriber count. You are making, $20,000 a month just from ads. It is crazy that you would stress Mom out over a mortgage payment when you are swimming in cash. It is not about the cash, Tessa, I said. It is about the agreement. Family is not a contract. Colette, she snapped. God, you are so transactional. I stopped asking for the money in person. Instead, I started watching. I watched as Tessa took over the house I was paying for. She painted the living room a shade of sage green that cost $60 a gallon. She replaced the light fixtures with trendy brass pendants. She did not ask me. I found out because I saw it on her Instagram. She posted a video tour of the house, twirling in the kitchen. The caption read, "Finally home. So blessed to have this sanctuary for my growing family. Homeowner blessed." In the comments, people congratulated her on the purchase. She liked every comment. She never corrected them. To the world. Tessa was the successful homeowner. I was the invisible banker. Then came the new house fund. Gavin had started a side hustle. Doing consulting for local businesses. Tessa bragged about it constantly. Gavin is putting everything into savings, she told me. We are building a nest egg so we can buy a vacation rental someday. I sat there, doing the mental math. If Gavin was making money, and they were living rent-free in my house, where was that cash going? I checked the mortgage portal. 0 principal payments. I checked the utility bills, which were still in my name because it is easier if you handle the auto pay. Colette, And we will Venmo you. They never Venmo'd me. The electric bill in July was $450. They were running the air conditioning at 68 degrees with the windows open. I started a spreadsheet. It was not out of malice. It was a survival instinct. I created a folder in the cloud named Project Oak Creek. Every time I paid the mortgage $3,800. I logged it. Every time I paid the property tax $6,000 a year, I logged it. Every time I paid the water bill, the internet bill, the trash collection fee, I logged it. I saved PDFs of every transfer. I took screenshots of every text message where my mother promised to pay me back. I saved the email where Gavin said, "We will have the money for you by Friday." A Friday that came and went 50 times. I tracked their spending, too. I was not stalking them. But social media is a public ledger. Tessa posted a photo of a new designer stroller, $1,200. Gavin posted a picture of his new gaming setup, $3,000. My mother posted about their weekend trip to the hot springs, $800. They had money. They just did not have money for me. 6 months ago, I realized I needed an exit strategy. The temporary arrangement had solidified into concrete. They were never going to leave. Why would they? They had a luxury home for free, a maid service that they charged to my credit card, which I promptly canceled, causing a 2-day silent treatment from Tessa and a sister they could guilt trip into silence. I did not go to a family therapist. I went to a shark. Renee Caldwell was a real estate attorney who specialized in difficult evictions and title disputes. Her office was glass and steel, and she wore suits that cost more than Tessa's car. I laid it all out on her desk. The deed, the mortgage statements, the spreadsheet. Renee looked through the papers, her face impassive. She adjusted her glasses. "Okay, Colette," she said. "Here is the good news. You own the house, 100%. There is no cosigner. There is no lease agreement. Legally, they are guests who have overstayed their welcome." "They think they own it," I said, "or they think they have a moral right to it." "Moral rights do not hold up in court," Renee said, "but we have to be careful. If we just serve them an eviction notice, they will claim they are tenants. Depending on the local laws, that could drag out for months. They could claim they made verbal agreements with you. They could claim they have an equitable interest because What did they pay for any renovations?" "They painted the walls," I said. "And Gavin built a fire pit in the backyard. It cost maybe $200 in materials." "Okay, that is negligible," Renee said. "Here's the problem. If they find out you're trying to get them out, they might stop maintaining the property, or worse, damage it, or they might try to file a lien." "So what do I do?" "You sell it," Renee said simply. "You do not evict them to move in. You sell the asset. It changes the legal framework. We list the house. We give them notice that the property is being liquidated. It forces a timeline. It makes it a business transaction, not a family feud." "They will hate me," I said. Renee looked at me. "Honey, they already disrespect you. That is worse than hate. Disrespect is expensive. Hate is free." We set the plan in motion. I signed the listing agreement with a broker Renee knew, a woman named Sarah, who was known for being aggressive and fast. We dated the listing to go live the Monday after Thanksgiving. I started moving my own money around. I opened new accounts at a bank my family did not use. I changed my passwords. I locked down my credit report. Then came the final straw. The trigger. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I got a notification from my bank. An attempt had been made to access my main checking account. The location of the login attempt was the IP address of the house on Oak Creek Lane. I called my mother. "Did you try to log into my bank account?" I asked. "Oh," she said, sounding flustered. "Well, Tessa needed to order something for the nursery, and she thought maybe, since you usually help out, she just tried the password you used for Netflix. She did not mean anything by it. She tried to break into my bank account to buy baby furniture, and my mother framed it as a misunderstanding. That was the moment the last thread of guilt snapped. I looked at my spreadsheet. The total amount I had spent on the house mortgage, down payment, repairs, Bills was now over $250,000. $250,000. I could have bought a small island. I could have retired early. Instead, I had bought a stage for Tessa to play the victim on. I called Renee. "It is a go," I said. "Prepare the file. I want everything ready for Thanksgiving." "Why Thanksgiving?" Renee asked. "Because," I said, looking at the invitation Tessa had sent me, which specified that I should bring 2 pies and 3 bottles of wine, but did not ask how I was doing. "If they want a family hub, I will give them a family meeting they will never forget." I spent the next week printing. I printed every bank statement. I printed the deed. I printed the emails. I organized them into a binder. And then I took the most important documents, the undeniable proof of ownership and the sale listing, and I put them in a thick, cream-colored envelope. When Gavin bragged about his new house fund, I smiled. I knew now that the fund was real. He had money. He just chose not to give it to me, which meant when I kicked them out, they would not be on the street. They would just be inconvenienced, and that made my conscience perfectly clear. So when I walked into that dining room, I was not walking in as a daughter or a sister. I was walking in as the CEO of a company that was downsizing its liabilities. And my family, they were the liabilities. The conference room at Caldwell and Associates was cold, quiet, and smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive coffee. It was the exact opposite of the chaotic, emotionally humid atmosphere of the house on Oak Creek Lane. Here, there were no guilt trips. There were no tears. There were only statutes, precedents, and the black and white reality of contract law. Renee sat across from me. She had a file open in front of her, her finger tracing a line on the deed I had provided. "It is airtight," she said, looking up over the rim of her glasses. "I have double-checked the county records. The deed is in your name. The mortgage is in your name. There is no murky language. There is no right of survivorship clause with your parents. Legally speaking, Colette, you are the lord of the manor, and they are guests who have forgotten to leave." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 years. "So they cannot claim squatters' rights or adverse possession." Renee laughed, a short, dry sound. "In Colorado. After 2 years. While you are paying the utilities and the taxes, absolutely not. Adverse possession requires a lot more time and a lot more hostility. What they are is tenants at will, at best. But since they have never paid rent, they are technically gratuitous licensees. We can revoke that license whenever we want." She slid a legal pad across the polished mahogany table toward me. "However," she continued, her voice turning sharp, "being right legally is different from winning practically. Families like yours do not fight with logic. They fight with mud. They will try to make this look like an elder abuse case or a breach of a verbal contract. We need to build a wall of evidence so high they cannot climb over it." "The truth file," I said. "Exactly," Renee nodded. "I want you to compile everything. I need the original deed. I need every mortgage statement from day one. I need the proof of funds for the down payment showing it came from your Crown Ridge earnings. I need a spreadsheet of every utility bill you paid. And most importantly, I need the texts." "The texts." "The texts where they ask for money," Renee said. "The texts where they admit they cannot pay. The texts where they acknowledge that you are the one keeping the lights on. We need to prove that this was never a partnership. It was a charity." I spent the next 3 nights building the dossier. It was a grueling excavation of my own exploitation. I printed out hundreds of pages. There was the text from my mother, Honey. "Can you cover the water bill? Dad's pension is late." There was the email from Gavin. "Hey Colette, we are a little short for the HOA fee this month. Catch you next time." There was the message from Tessa. "The lawn guys are here. They need a check. Can you Venmo me $200? I organized them chronologically in a 3-ring binder. By the time I was done, it was 3 inches thick. It was not just a pile of paper. It was an autopsy of my relationship with my family. But Renee had given me another task, one that felt more aggressive. "You need to secure your perimeter," she had told me. "If they have access to your digital life, They have access to your weakness. Lock it down. I went home to my apartment and opened my laptop. I started with the streaming services. I saw that there were 5 profiles on my Netflix account: Mom, Dad, Tessa, and Gavin's Man Cave. I deleted the last 4. Then I changed the password. I did the same for Hulu, HBO, and Spotify. Then I went deeper. I checked my Amazon Prime account. They had been using my free shipping for years. I saw orders for diapers, protein powder, and even a set of patio lights. I removed their addresses from the saved list. I changed the password. Then I called the credit bureaus. I placed a freeze on my social security number. I called my bank and set up 2-factor authentication, specifically instructing them that no voice authorization was allowed, only a code sent to my personal phone. I was severing the invisible umbilical cords that they had been feeding on. The next day, my phone blew up. Text from Tessa. Hey, is Netflix down? I can't log in. Text from Gavin. Did you change the Prime password? I need to order parts. Text from Mom Colette. The TV is not working. Dad is trying to watch his show. I did not reply to any of them. I just sent a single group email, copying all of them. Subject account security updates. I have updated my digital security protocols due to suspicious activity. I am no longer sharing subscription passwords. Please create your own accounts. The silence that followed that email was furious. I could feel the heat of it radiating from my phone, but I did not cave. I did not apologize. I was done apologizing for owning things. 2 days later, I went back to Renee's office. I dropped the binder on her desk. This is impressive, she said, flipping through the pages. This is a shield. Now, we need a sword. The listing, I said. Correct. But listen to me carefully. Colette, Renee leaned forward, her expression serious. When you pull this trigger, they are going to panic. And when narcissists panic, they do not reflect. They attack. They will try to create a scene. They will try to corner you in front of people. They will try to force you to make a promise you cannot keep because you are afraid of looking bad. They are planning to do exactly that at Thanksgiving, I said. Tessa is pregnant with triplets. She is going to announce it, and then she is going to demand I buy her a bigger house in front of the entire church group. Renee raised an eyebrow. Triplets? That is a hell of a leverage point. Babies are the ultimate emotional weapon. She is going to use those children as human shields before they are even born. I know, I said. She has already started. Tessa had been leaving breadcrumbs all week. She posted a photo on Facebook of the current nursery, the one in the house I owned with a sad face emoji. Caption, trying to figure out how to fit 3 cribs in here. It is just impossible. We are so cramped. Praying for a miracle and some more square footage triplets growing pains. Then, a comment from her friend, maybe your rich sister will help out. Tessa's reply, haha. We can hope. She certainly has the means. It must be nice to have no kids and all that disposable income. She was priming the audience. She was painting the picture of the poor. Struggling mother and the cold, wealthy aunt. She was setting the stage so that when she made her demand, the crowd would already be on her side. So how do we handle the listing? I asked Renee. We list it now, Renee said, but we set the showing date for after the holiday. We do not want a for sale sign in the yard when you pull up on Thanksgiving. That gives them time to prepare a counter-narrative. We want the listing to be live on the MLS multiple listing service so it is a legal fact. But we keep the physical sign in the trunk of the realtor's car until Friday morning. I nodded. Stealth mode. I have a broker in mind, Renee said. Her name is Sarah. She is not the warm and fuzzy type. She sells houses. She does not sell dreams. I have already drafted the listing agreement. I signed the papers that afternoon. The house on Oak Creek Lane, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. Finished basement was officially on the market. The asking price was $750,000, but there was one legal requirement we could not skip. You have to give them notice, Renee said. Even though they are not paying rent, you cannot just sell the house out from under them without a warning. We have to send a notice to vacate or a notice of intent to sell. If I send it to the house, my mother will hide it, I said. She intercepts the mail. She hides bills she does not want Dad to see. If a letter from a law firm arrives, she will bury it in the garden before she lets Gavin or Tessa see it. That is fine, Renee said. The law requires us to send it. It does not require them to read it. We will send it via certified mail. We will also email a digital copy to all of them. But we will time the email to land. Let us say, Wednesday night. No, I said, a cold plan forming in my mind. Send the certified letter. Let Mom hide it. That works in my favor. It proves she knew and chose to ignore it. But do not send the email yet. I want to deliver the news in person. Renee looked at me, assessing my resolve. You are walking into a lion's den. Colette, if you do this at Thanksgiving, it is going to be ugly. They will scream. They will cry. They might throw things. I know, I said. What is your strategy if they start lying? Renee asked. If Tessa screams that you promised her the house. If Gavin claims he paid for the roof. I do not argue, I said, reciting the rule Renee had taught me. I do not engage in the drama. I just show the documents. Exactly, Renee said. Paper is kryptonite to liars. Do not get pulled into a debate about feelings. How could you do this to us? Is a trap. You promised is a trap. You answer every emotional question with a factual statement. The house is sold. The deed is in my name. You have 30 days. I left the office with the binder tucked under my arm. The air outside was crisp, signaling the coming winter. Thanksgiving was 2 days away. I spent the next 48 hours preparing. I did not buy a new dress. I did not get my hair done. I prepared like I was going into a deposition. I scanned every document in the binder and saved it to my phone, ready to be airdropped or emailed at a second's notice. I had the contact information for the realtor, Sarah, ready to pass on. I had the number for the local sheriff's non-emergency line saved, just in case Gavin decided to get physical. I watched Tessa's social media. She was escalating. Status update. So excited for Thanksgiving. Big announcement coming. God is moving mountains for our family. She had no idea the mountain was about to fall on her. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat in my apartment. My phone buzzed. It was my mother, Mom Colette. Please bring 2 pumpkin pies tomorrow and try to be there by noon. Tessa wants to take family photos before we eat. Wear something pastel so you match the theme. I stared at the screen. Wear something pastel. Even now, I was just a prop in their tableau. I was just background scenery that needed to be color coordinated. I typed back, I will be there. I did not agree to the pastel. I did not agree to the pie. I looked at the envelope on my table. Inside was the listing agreement, the copy of the deed, and the certified letter receipt that confirmed the notice to vacate had been delivered to the mailbox at 42 Oak Creek Lane yesterday at 10 a.m. My mother had signed for it. I checked the tracking, signed by D. Murphy. She had the letter. She knew, and she had said nothing. She was hoping that if she ignored it, it would go away. She was hoping that the sheer momentum of Tessa's pregnancy announcement would steamroll over my legal rights. She was betting that I would be too embarrassed to ruin the holiday. She was betting on the old Colette, the Colette who ate the vanilla cake, the Colette who paid the bills in silence. She did not know that Colette was dead. I picked up the envelope and slid it into my purse. It fit perfectly. Renee's voice echoed in my head. Do not argue. Just show the documents. I turned off the lights in my apartment. I slept soundly for 8 hours. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. It was supposed to be a day of gratitude, and I was grateful. I was grateful that I finally had the courage to burn the bridge while I was still standing on the safe side. The trap was set. The paper trail was laid. The witnesses were invited. Tessa wanted a stage fine. I would give her the performance of a lifetime. But she was forgetting one crucial rule of theater: never ad-lib with someone who has memorized the script. And I had written the ending. The drive to the house on Oak Creek Lane usually took 20 minutes. Today, I made it take 30. I drove exactly the speed limit, staying in the right lane, letting the aggressive holiday traffic flow around me like water around a stone. On the passenger seat beside me sat a pumpkin pie. It was not homemade. It was in a plastic clamshell container with a bright orange sticker from the local grocery store. 2 years ago, I would have spent 3 days baking. I would have roasted pumpkins from scratch, made the crust with expensive European butter, and timed the baking so it would still be warm when I arrived. I would have done it to prove I was worthy of a seat at their table. Today, I brought a store-bought pie that cost $12.99. It was not a gift. It was a prop. It was the minimum entry fee required to witness the end of an era. I turned onto the street and hit the brakes. The curb was lined with cars. It looked less like a family gathering and more like a block party or a funeral. I recognized my father's sedan in the driveway, flanked by Gavin's truck. But behind them were cars I did not expect. There was the pastor's beige station wagon. There was the sleek black SUV belonging to the Millers. The neighbors who always looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. There were 3 other cars belonging to Tessa's friends from her prayer circle. My stomach tightened, but not with fear. It was a cold, sharp recognition. This was not a dinner. This was an audience. Tessa had stacked the deck. She knew that making a demand in private was risky because I might say no, but making a demand in front of God, the neighbors, and the clergy. She was banking on the social contract. She was betting that I would be too polite to refuse her in front of a crowd. She was weaponizing my own manners against me. I parked my car 2 houses down. The only spot left, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked calm. I looked expensive. I looked like someone who could afford to buy a house, which was exactly the problem. I reached into my purse and touched the cool, thick paper of the envelope. It was still there, my shield, my sword. I grabbed the pie and walked up the driveway. The front door was already open, and the sound of laughter spilled out onto the lawn. It sounded manic, too loud, the kind of laughter people use to fill awkward silences. I stepped inside. The heat hit me first. The house was stiflingly hot, smelling of roasting turkey, cinnamon, and heavy perfume. The entryway was piled high with coats and purses. "Colette, you made it." My mother appeared from the kitchen. She was wearing an apron over her Sunday dress, wiping her hands on a towel. She came toward me for a hug, but her body language was all wrong. She was vibrating with nervous energy. She hugged me quickly, a stiff, perfunctory squeeze, and then pulled back without looking me in the eye. She knew. She had to know. The certified letter from Renee's office had been delivered yesterday morning. I had seen the signature confirmation. D. Murphy. She had held the eviction notice in her hands. She knew this house was being sold, but looking at her now, smiling her brittle, terrified smile, I realized what she had done. She had not opened it, or if she had buried it deep in the recesses of her denial. She was playing a dangerous game of magical thinking. If she did not acknowledge the letter, then the letter did not exist. If she could just get through today, if she could just get Tessa's plan to work, then maybe the reality in that envelope would simply dissolve. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom," I said, handing her the plastic pie container. She looked at the store-bought label, and I saw a flicker of judgment cross her face, followed immediately by relief. If I was bringing cheap pie, maybe I was not in a fighting mood. Maybe I was just tired. "Oh, lovely," she chirped. "Go on in. Everyone is in the living room." I walked into the main room. It was packed. There must have been 25 people squeezed into the space. Gavin was standing by the fireplace, holding a beer, laughing loudly at something the pastor was saying. He looked confident, the lord of the manor surveying his domain. He did not look like a man who had stolen thousands of dollars from his fiancée's sister. He looked like a man who believed his own con. And then there was Tessa. She was sitting in the center of the room on the velvet armchair I had paid for, her feet resting on the ottoman I had paid for. She looked spectacular. She was wearing a form-fitting dress that accentuated her pregnancy. Her hair curled into perfect, glossy waves. Her makeup was flawless. Done with the precision of a news anchor, she was glowing, radiant, the undisputed protagonist of this scene. When she saw me, her smile widened, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were calculating. They swept over me, checking my clothes, my mood, assessing the threat level. "Colette," she called out, not standing up. "Come say hi. We were just talking about how blessed we are this year." I walked over. The conversation in the room lulled slightly. The guests were watching. They sensed the tension. Even if they did not know the source, they were the jury, and the trial had just begun. "Hello, Tessa," I said. "You look nice." "I feel huge," she laughed, placing a hand on her stomach. "But it is worth it. Gavin and I we are so ready for the next chapter." Gavin came over and draped an arm around her shoulders. "Hey, Colette. Good to see you. Thanks for coming." His tone was dismissive, the way one speaks to a distant relative they are obligated to invite. He did not mention the money. He did not mention the emails I had sent about the utility bills. He was playing his part, the protective patriarch. I moved away from them, navigating the crowded room. I found my father sitting in the corner, staring at the football game on the television. He looked older than I remembered, his skin papery and gray. "Hi, Dad," I said. He looked up, blinking slowly. "Hey, honey, you made it." He did not ask how I was. He did not ask about my work. He just nodded, a slow, rhythmic motion that signaled he was checking out of reality. He was the passive enabler. The man who let the women in his life run the wars while he claimed neutrality. He knew about the money. He knew about the exploitation. But he had decided long ago that his comfort was more important than my justice. "Dinner is ready," my mother announced, her voice pitching up a little too high. We shuffled into the dining room. The table had been extended with folding leaves to accommodate the crowd. It was set beautifully, with linen napkins and fresh flowers. I scanned the table, looking for my place. I found it. It was at the very end of the table, squeezed against the wall, right next to the folding card table where the 3 toddlers from the neighbor's family were sitting. I looked at the place card. It was written in Tessa's swirling cursive. "Colette, 2 L's, 2 T's. My name is Colette, 1 L, 2 T's." It was such a small thing. A typo, a mistake. If I complained about it, I would look petty. Oh, look at Colette, making a scene about a spelling error. But it was not a mistake. It was a message. It said, "We do not know who you are, and we do not care to learn. You are an accessory." I pulled out my chair and sat down. My knees knocked against the table leg. To my left, a 2-year-old was hammering a spoon against a plastic bowl. To my far right, at the head of the table, Tessa and Gavin sat like royalty. I felt someone behind me. I turned, and there was Aunt June. She was my father's younger sister, the kind of woman who still wore leather jackets and kept her hair dyed a stubborn, defiant purple. Even at 55, she had a glass of red wine in one hand and a pack of cigarettes in the other. She slowed as she passed my chair. Then she bent close, her voice a dry, low rasp meant for my ears alone. "That name card is nonsense," she whispered. I looked up at her, caught off guard. June almost never stepped into the family drama. Most nights, she stayed on the porch and smoked until it was time to go. "They're setting something up," she murmured, her eyes sliding toward Tessa. "The whole vibe is wrong, feels like a timeshare pitch." She gave my shoulder a squeeze, firm, surprisingly steady. "Eat, watch, don't bite, let them trap themselves." Then she walked away and took her seat on the other side of the room. I took a deep breath. Eat, observe, do not react. I reached into my pocket and silenced my phone. I felt the envelope again. It was rigid against my hip. It felt like a loaded gun. I knew exactly what was inside. I knew that in less than 2 hours, The dynamic in this room would shift so violently that people would get whiplash. The meal began. The food was excellent, which almost made it worse. My mother had outdone herself. The turkey was moist, the stuffing savory, but I could not taste any of it. I was too busy watching the performance. Tessa was conducting the room like an orchestra. She made sure everyone had wine. She laughed at the pastor's bad jokes. She deferred to Gavin whenever a question about the future came up. "Oh, we are just trusting God," Tessa said loudly, addressing the table. "We know that when you have faith, the path clears. We have been praying for space, for room to grow." "Amen," the pastor said, waving a turkey leg. "It is hard, though," Gavin added, sighing theatrically, "with the economy the way it is. But we believe that family takes care of family." He looked straight at me when he said it. I did not look down. I did not blush. I took a bite of cranberry sauce and chewed slowly. I stared right back at him until he looked away. My mother was fluttering around the table, refilling glasses that were already full. She was manic. Every time she passed me, she sped up. She was terrified that I would open my mouth. She was terrified that the bubble she had helped blow up was about to burst. I realized then that she was not protecting me. She was not even protecting Tessa. She was protecting the illusion. She wanted the neighbors to think we were the perfect, blessed family. She wanted the pastor to think she had raised charitable, loving children. The truth that she was an accomplice to financial theft was incompatible with the story she told herself. The dinner seemed to last for days. I listened to the Millers talk about their vacation in Cabo. I listened to Tessa's friend talk about her gluten intolerance. I said nothing. I was the ghost at the feast. Finally, the plates were cleared. The air in the room changed. It grew heavier, charged with static. "Who is ready for dessert?" my mother asked, her voice cracking slightly. "I am," Gavin shouted. My mother brought out the pies. She placed my plastic container on the sidebar, unopened, and placed a massive, homemade apple pie in the center of the table. Then, she sat down. Tessa cleared her throat. She picked up a silver spoon. Ding, ding, ding. She tapped the side of her crystal wine glass. The sound cut through the chatter like a knife. The room went silent. Every head turned toward her. This was it. The moment she had curated. The lighting was perfect. The audience was fed and pliable. The witnesses were in place. Tessa stood up slowly, smoothing her dress over her stomach. She looked angelic. She looked vulnerable. She looked like a predator. I sat back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. I felt the corner of the envelope digging into my side. "Go ahead, Tessa," I thought, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. "Take your bow." She took a breath, smiled at the crowd, and opened her mouth to begin the end of her life as she knew it. Tessa stood there, a champagne flute of sparkling cider raised high, basking in the spotlight she had manufactured. She let the silence stretch for exactly 3 seconds, a practiced pause she must have learned from watching award shows. "We went for the ultrasound on Tuesday," she said, her voice trembling with a sweetness that made my teeth ache. "And the doctor told us to sit down. He said, 'Folks, you are not hearing one heartbeat.'" She paused again. My mother gasped, a sound that seemed entirely involuntary, yet perfectly timed. "He said we are hearing 3, Tessa whispered, then shouted, "We are having triplets." The room did not just react. It detonated. It was a wall of noise that hit me physically. The women from the prayer group shrieked, a high-pitched sound that vibrated against the crystal glasses. The Millers stood up and clapped. My mother burst into tears, instant and heavy, burying her face in her hands, as if she had just witnessed a resurrection. Phones shot up into the air immediately. I saw at least 5 screens glowing, recording the moment for Facebook, for Instagram, for the digital archive of Tessa's canonization. 3, my father bellowed, standing up to grab Gavin in a bear hug. 3 boys, 3 girls. My God, Gavin, you are a machine. Gavin stood there, grinning. It was the grin of a man who had just placed a winning bet with someone else's money. He looked around the room, making eye contact with the other men, puffing his chest out. He looked like he had invented fatherhood. "We are blessed," Gavin shouted over the noise. "We are just overwhelmed." Tessa was crying now. Delicate, photogenic tears that did not ruin her mascara. She hugged her friends. She let my mother embrace her belly. For 2 minutes, the dining room was a chaotic swirl of congratulations and hysteria. I sat still. I did not stand. I did not clap. I took a sip of water. The water was warm. Tessa pulled away from my mother and raised her hand again. The room quieted down, obedient to her command. They wanted to hear the rest. They knew there was a second act. "But," Tessa said, her face turning serious, "with 3 babies coming, and the little one we hope to have after that," she laughed, and the room chuckled with her. "We realized something scary. This house, our beautiful home, it is just too small. We cannot fit 3 cribs in the nursery. We cannot fit a minivan in the driveway." She turned her head, her eyes locked onto mine. It was not a look of sisterly affection, it was a look of expectation. It was the look a queen gives to a subject when the tax collector arrives. "But God provides," Tessa said, her voice ringing out clear and confident, "and we are so lucky that our family believes in supporting each other, since we are about to be a family of 5. Colette is going to buy us a bigger house." She said it with such casual certainty that for a second, nobody reacted. It was as if she had said, "Colette is going to pass the salt." Then, reality caught up with the guests. I saw Mrs. Miller's smile falter. I saw the pastor blink, confused. There was a ripple of awkwardness, a low murmur of confusion. Asking your sister to buy you a house in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner was aggressive, even for Tessa. But my mother was ready. She saw the hesitation in the room, and she jumped in to smooth the edges. "Isn't that wonderful?" my mother cried out, clapping her hands together rhythmically. "Give Colette a hand, everyone. She has been so blessed in her career, and she wants to share it. That is what family does." She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Smile." Her eyes said, "Play along. Do not ruin this." The guests, relieved to have a social cue, started to clap. It was polite, hesitant applause, but it was enough to validate Tessa's delusion. Tessa beamed. She walked toward me, the crowd parting to let her through. She stopped at the end of the table, standing right next to my chair. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Her fingers dug in slightly. "I mean," Tessa said, looking down at me with a smirk that was meant to look playful, but felt like a razor. "It is the least she can do. Right, Colette is not really a real adult yet. No kids, no husband, just her little internet job. But at least she can pay for the roof over the heads of the people who are actually building a future." The room went dead silent. The insult hung in the air, gross and heavy. Even Gavin looked down at his shoes. Tessa had gone too off script. She had said the quiet part out loud that my value was purely financial because I had failed to reproduce. I felt the blood rushing in my ears, but my face remained a mask of stone. I looked at her hand on my shoulder. Then I looked up at her face. I did not shove her hand away. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I smiled. It was a small, terrifyingly calm smile. "Congratulations, Tessa," I said. My voice was steady. It carried to the back of the room. Tessa exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. She thought she had won. She thought my silence was submission. She thought the congratulations was a capitulation. "Thanks, sis," she said, leaning in to hug me. "I knew you would step up. Gavin sent you the Zillow link for the place in Cherry Creek. We can go see it on Saturday." I did not hug her back. I waited until she pulled away. "Actually," I said, speaking clearly so the pastor in the back could hear every syllable, "I have already found a house." Tessa froze. Her eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. "You did?" she shrieked. She turned to the crowd. "She found one already. Oh my God. Colette, you are amazing. Where is it? Does it have the pool? Show me pictures. She reached for her phone, ready to see her new palace. Gavin stepped forward, his greed overcoming his awkwardness. Does it have a 3-car garage? He asked. The room leaned in. They were hooked. They thought they were witnessing a moment of extreme generosity. They thought I was the hero of Tessa's story. I took a slow breath. I picked up my napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth. It is a beautiful house, I said. It has 4 bedrooms. It has a library. It is very quiet. I love libraries, Tessa squealed. Where is it? I looked her dead in the eye. It is in the city, I said. And it is for me. Tessa blinked. What? The house, I said. I bought it for me. I signed the closing papers yesterday. I move in tomorrow. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. The previous silence had been awkward. This silence was dangerous. It was the sound of oxygen being sucked out of a room before a fire ignites. Tessa laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. I do not get it. What about us? You said you found a house. I did, I repeated. For myself, I am moving out of my apartment. I am starting a new chapter, just like you. But, Tessa looked around the room, her face flushing red. But we need a house. You just heard me. We are having triplets. We need this house to be upgraded. I heard you, I said. And that sounds like a very expensive responsibility. I am sure you and Gavin have a plan for it. You are the plan, Tessa shouted. The veneer of the sweet, glowing mother-to-be cracked, revealing the spoiled child underneath. You are supposed to buy it. You have the money. You cannot just use it on yourself. It is my money, I said. And frankly, I am done spending it on people who insult me while eating the food I paid for. My mother rushed forward, her hands fluttering. Colette, stop it. You are embarrassing your sister. We can talk about this later. We are talking about it now, I said, because Tessa brought it up now. She wanted an audience. Mom, I am just giving the audience the full story. I reached into my blazer pocket. I felt the envelope. It was warm from my body heat. I pulled it out. I did not throw it. I did not slam it. I placed it gently on the tablecloth, right next to the untouched bowl of cranberry sauce. And regarding the house we are sitting in, I said, Colette, do not, my father warned, his voice low. The house we are sitting in, I continued, ignoring him, is not available for your renovations. It is not available for your nursery, because it is being sold. Tessa stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I listed it on the market this morning, I said. The showing schedule starts on Monday. You have 30 days to vacate. You cannot do that, Gavin yelled. He stepped toward me, his face turning an ugly shade of plum. This is our house. We have lived here for 2 years. You have lived here for 2 years, I corrected him. But you have never paid a dime. That does not make you owners. Gavin, it makes you guests. And the party is over. The room was frozen. The Millers were staring at their plates. The pastor looked like he wanted to vanish through the floor. I looked across the table. Aunt June, I called out. June was already standing. She had been waiting for this. She walked over to the table, her boots thudding heavily on the hardwood. She looked at the terrified faces of my family. Then she looked at me with a grim nod of respect. Yes, Colette, she said. Would you mind reading this for the room? I asked, sliding the envelope toward her. I think there is some confusion about who owns what. I think they need to hear the legal facts. June picked up the envelope. She held it up to the light. It was a thick, cream-colored packet with the logo of Renee's law firm embossed in the corner. Tessa took a step back. She looked at the envelope with genuine terror. She could scream over my voice. She could manipulate my mother. She could gaslight Gavin. But she could not argue with a deed. She could not cry her way out of a notarized document. The room was silent. But it was a loud silence. It was the sound of a guillotine blade being hoisted up, waiting to drop. June ripped the seal. The sound of the tearing paper echoed like a gunshot in the quiet dining room. "Let us see," June said, pulling out the first document. She put on her reading glasses, taking her time. Warranty deed, dated 2 years ago. Grantee Colette Murphy. She looked up over her glasses at Tessa. "It says here Colette owns the land, the house, and all improvements thereon. It does not mention a Tessa. It does not mention a Gavin." Tessa started to shake. "That is a lie. Mom said it was ours." "Mom can say the moon is made of cheese," June said, flipping the page. "But the county recorder says this house belongs to Colette." June pulled out the next sheet. "And here we have a notice to vacate, addressed to all occupants, effective immediately upon expiration of the 30-day statutory period." My mother let out a wail. "Colette, how could you?" "On Thanksgiving." I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I looked at the 25 people staring at me. They looked horrified. They looked judgmental. But mostly, they looked afraid. They were afraid because they realized that the quiet girl in the corner had been keeping score the whole time. "Yes, on Thanksgiving," I said to my mother. "Because this is the day you all decided to carve me up and serve me like the turkey. I just decided to get off the menu." I looked at Tessa. She was not crying anymore. She was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You are ruining my life," she hissed. "No, Tessa," I said calmly. "I am just stopping you from ruining mine." I turned to June. "Read the rest. Aunt June. Specifically the part about the payment history. I think Gavin might be interested to know where his house fund actually went, since not a penny of it ever came to me." Gavin's head snapped toward Tessa. "What?" I picked up my purse. "Enjoy the pie," I said. "I bought it, just like I bought everything else." The sound of paper tearing in a silent room is a violent noise. It is sharper than a scream and more final than a slamming door. Aunt June held the envelope open. Her fingers stained slightly red from the wine glass she had been clutching earlier. She pulled out the first document, a heavy cream-colored sheet with a blue government stamp in the corner. She adjusted her reading glasses, sliding them down the bridge of her nose, and looked at the page with the scrutiny of a forensic accountant. "Property address," June read aloud, her voice gravelly and devoid of any theatrical inflection. 42 Oak Creek Lane, Centennial, Colorado." She paused, letting the address hang in the air like a sentence. "Owner of record," she continued, her eyes flicking up to meet my father's gaze before dropping back to the page. "Colette Marie Murphy." There was no stutter. There was no hesitation. It was a statement of legal fact, as absolute as gravity. My mother's face drained of color. It happened instantly, as if someone had pulled a plug in her heels. She looked at the paper, then at me. Her eyes wide with a performance of shock that she almost seemed to believe herself. "Why?" my mother stammered, her hand fluttering to her throat. "Why is it in your name, Colette? We agreed this was a family asset. We agreed you were just holding it for us." I looked at her. I did not blink. "Do not rewrite history, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with her rising panic. 2 years ago, in the kitchen of the old house, you told me specifically that Dad's credit score was 580 because of the medical bills. You told me that if you applied for the loan, the interest rate would be over 8%. You asked me, and I'm quoting you directly now, to be the temporary bridge because my credit was perfect. My mother opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. You said, "It is just for 6 months. Colette, just until we refinance." You begged me to keep it in my name to protect the family from a high rate. I did exactly what you asked. I kept it in my name, and because I did, I am the owner. Tessa slammed her hands down on the table. The silverware jumped. "You are splitting hairs!" she screamed. Her face was flushed, her perfect makeup starting to look like war paint. "It does not matter whose name is on a piece of paper. This is my home. I am pregnant. Colette. I am carrying 3 babies. You cannot do this to me." The guests recoiled. The image of the sweet, expectant mother had vanished, replaced by a cornered animal baring its teeth. "I am not doing anything to you," I said. "I am managing my portfolio, and regarding the babies. Let us be very clear." I leaned forward slightly. "You cannot use those children as a bill. Tessa, you cannot use a pregnancy as a shield against reality. Being a mother does not grant you the right to squat in a house you do not own and demand renovations you cannot afford. Those babies need a father and a mother, not a landlord who subsidizes their existence." "I am not a squatter," Tessa shrieked. "I live here." "So do the mice in the attic," June said, flipping to the next page of the document stack. "But they do not claim to own the deed." The brutality of the comment made Gavin flinch. He looked at Tessa, and for the first time all night, the adoration in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by a dawn of confusion. "Wait a second," Gavin said. He turned to Tessa, his voice lower, laced with suspicion. "Tessa, you told me the house was in a trust. You told me your dad put it in a family trust, and that we were the beneficiaries." Tessa froze. Her eyes darted from Gavin to me, then back to Gavin. Well, it is practically the same thing," she stammered. "Colette is family. It is a family trust in spirit." "Spirit does not sign checks," I said. Gavin looked at my parents. "Did you guys tell her it was in a trust?" My father looked down at his plate, suddenly finding the remnants of his turkey fascinating. My mother looked away. "We thought it was best not to complicate things for you. Gavin," my mother whispered, "we wanted you to feel secure." "Secure," Gavin laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "I have been putting money into a renovation fund for a house that belongs to my sister-in-law. I thought we were building equity." "Speaking of equity," June interrupted, her voice cutting through the marital dispute like a machete. "I have the payment history here. It is quite a read. It is better than a novel." She held up a spreadsheet. It was color-coded. I had spent 3 hours formatting it to ensure even a child could understand the flow of money, or rather, the lack of it. "Mortgage payments," June read. 24 months, total amount paid $91,200, paid by Colette Murphy. She flipped the page. "Property taxes, $12,000, paid by Colette Murphy." She flipped again. "Homeowners Association fees, $6,000, paid by Colette Murphy." She looked up at the table. "I am looking for a payment from a Gavin or a Tessa or a Gordon. I am scanning the columns here. I see a lot of zeros. In fact, it is exclusively zeros." Tessa's face twisted. She looked like she was about to explode. She needed a win. She needed to reclaim the narrative of her ownership. "That is just paper," Tessa yelled, pointing a manicured finger at the document. "That does not show the work I put my soul into this house. I renovated the kitchen, I picked out the tile, I painted the nursery, I created the value in this home. That is my sweat equity." I smiled. It was the smile of a trap snapping shut. "Aunt June," I said softly, "would you mind reading the receipts from the folder marked Renovations?" June smiled back. It was a shark's smile. She pulled out a stack of invoices stapled together. "Let us see," June said. "Invoice from Miller Construction for kitchen backsplash and counter installation, $8,000, paid by check number 402 from the account of Colette Murphy." Tessa opened her mouth, but June kept reading. "Invoice from Elite Painting Services for nursery and master bedroom, $3,500, paid by credit card, ending in 5591. Cardholder Colette Murphy." June looked at Tessa. "Did you hold the brush, Tessa? Or did you just point at the wall and tell the man my niece paid for where to paint?" "I designed it," Tessa screamed. "I have the vision." "Vision is free," I said. "Labor costs money, materials cost money, and I paid for all of it, every tile, every gallon of paint. Every light fixture you posted on Instagram as your own DIY project. I have the receipts. Tessa, I have the bank statements. You did not put equity into this house. You put throw pillows into this house. The room was so quiet that I could hear the wind rattling the window panes. The guests were paralyzed. They were witnessing the total dissection of a lie they had believed for 2 years. They looked at Tessa, and they did not see a victim anymore. They saw a fraud. My father finally spoke. His voice was trembling, weak and raspy. "Colette," he said, "please, stop this. You have made your point. But you cannot actually sell the house. Where would we go? Where would your sister go with 3 babies? You are just saying this to scare us, right? To teach us a lesson." He looked at me with hope. He wanted me to be the daughter I used to be, the one who threatened but never followed through, the one who could be guilted back into submission. I looked at him, and I felt nothing. The well of empathy had finally run dry. "I am not teaching a lesson, Dad," I said. "I am executing a contract." I looked at June. She nodded and pulled out the final document. "Listing agreement," June read. "Signed by Colette Murphy and Sarah Jenkins of Centennial Real Estate Group, dated November 14th, status active." "It is already done," I said to my father. "The house has been on the private listing network for 2 weeks. I have accepted 3 requests for showings. The first one is Monday morning at 9 o'clock. The broker will be here to install the lockbox on the door." My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. "You invited strangers into our home." "My home," I corrected her. "And yes, they are potential buyers. They have been pre-approved. They have funds, unlike the current occupants." "Monday," Tessa whispered. The reality was finally sinking in. The timeline was not theoretical. It was days away. "You are bringing people here on Monday." "Yes," I said. "So you will need to clean up. The broker said the house shows better when it is decluttered. You might want to pack away the personal items, like the cribs." Tessa looked down at the keys she was still clutching in her hand. The keys to the new house she had demanded. The metal must have felt cold and useless against her palm. She looked at them. Then she looked at me. Her face was a mask of despair and fury. "What do you want?" she asked. Her voice was low, shaking with rage. "You want me to beg, is that it? You want me to get on my knees in front of everyone and beg you for a place to live? You want to humiliate me?" "No," I said. "I do not want your humiliation. That is a byproduct, not the goal." "Then what?" she screamed, throwing the keys onto the table. They skidded across the linen and hit the untouched pie. "You have the money. You have the house. You have the documents. You won. What more do you want from me?" I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I looked at the 25 faces staring at me. I looked at the parents who had used me as an ATM. I looked at the sister who had used me as a stepping stone. I looked at the brother-in-law who had used me as a venture capital fund. "I do not want anything from you, Tessa," I said. "I do not want your apology. I do not want your gratitude. I certainly do not want your money, because I know you do not have any." I picked up my purse and slung it over my shoulder. "I just want to resign," I said. "I am quitting the job of being the family bank. I am retiring from the position of the safety net. I want the one thing I have paid for over and over again, but never received." I walked to the door, stopping only to look back one last time. "I want to be a stranger," I said, "because strangers treat me with more respect than you do." I turned and walked out of the dining room. Behind me, the silence broke. I heard my mother sobbing. I heard Gavin shouting something indistinguishable. I heard Tessa screaming my name. But for the first time in my life, I did not turn back. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cold, sharp air of the late November afternoon. The wind hit my face, and it felt like a baptism. The silence in my car as I drove away from the house on Oak Creek Lane was not peaceful. It was the heavy, ringing silence that follows a bomb blast. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. But my heart rate was surprisingly steady. I checked my smartwatch. 72 beats per minute. I was not panicking. I was processing. For 34 years, I had been the glue that held the Murphy family sculpture together. I was the one who filled the cracks with cash, the one who smoothed over the rough edges with silence. Today, I had dissolved the glue. I had let gravity take over. And now, I was watching in the rearview mirror as the sculpture shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. I did not go straight home. I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over, a place where nobody knew me, and I ordered a black tea. I sat by the window and placed my phone on the table face up. It started within 11 minutes. The first notification was from Instagram. It was Tessa. Of course it was Tessa. She operated on a speed that bypassed reflection and went straight to public relations. I opened the app. She had posted a story. It was a black screen with white text. The font stark and somber. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. Money reveals character. Toxic family is real. And sometimes you have to walk away to protect your peace. Praying for my babies tonight. I almost laughed. It was a masterpiece of vague booking. She did not name me. She did not mention the house or the eviction or the fact that she had been living rent-free for 2 years. She could not. She knew that if she posted specific lies like Colette kicked us out of our own house, I would post the deed. She knew I had the receipts. And for the first time in her life, she was terrified of the truth. So she pivoted to the only weapon she had left: victimhood. She was trying to paint a picture where I was the cold, unfeeling villain who chose a bank balance over family without giving anyone the details of who actually owned the bank balance. Then came the calls. My mother called first. I watched the screen light up with Mom. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. She called again immediately. And again, on the 4th attempt, I realized she was not going to stop. And if I turned the phone off, she might call the police and claim I was suicidal to force a welfare check. That was her style. Weaponized concern. I answered on the 5th ring. I did not say hello. I just listened. "You have to fix this," my mother sobbed. She was not asking. She was demanding. Her voice was high and thin, laced with the panic of a woman who realizes her retirement plan just walked out the door. "Colette, you cannot do this. Tessa is hysterical. She is hyperventilating. Do you want her to lose those babies? Is that what you want?" "I want her to pack," I said calmly. "You are being cruel," she screamed. The sobbing stopped instantly, replaced by a sharp, transactional anger. "Fine. You want to sell the house? Fine. You made your point. You are the big, powerful owner. But you have to buy them something else. You cannot leave your sister on the street." "I am not leaving her on the street," I said. "I am leaving her with her husband and her parents, between the 4 of you. I am sure you can come up with a security deposit on a rental." "A rental," my mother spat the word out like it was a slur. "She is having triplets. Colette, she needs a home. She needs security. If you sell this house, you take the profit and you put a down payment on that place in Cherry Creek. That is the compromise. That is fair." "Fair?" I asked. "Mom, listen to me closely. There is no compromise. There is no negotiation. I am not buying another house. I am not signing another lease. I am not co-signing a loan for a used car. The Bank of Colette is closed." "You promised to take care of us," she wailed. "I promised to help you get back on your feet 2 years ago," I said. "You decided to lay down instead. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. I blocked her number for the next 24 hours. I needed silence to plan the next phase. Then came the text from my father. It was short. It was written in his distinctively passive voice, the voice of a man who had spent 40 years letting his wife do the fighting while he enjoyed the spoils. "Colette, please, your mother is a wreck. Tessa is throwing things. Can you just call them and say we can work something out? Just be flexible. Do not make this a war. We can fix this quietly. Flexible." There was that word again, the word that had haunted my childhood. Flexible meant I bend until I break so that Tessa can stand tall. Flexible meant I absorb the debt so they can absorb the luxury. I looked at the text and felt a wave of exhaustion. He did not care about the justice of the situation. He did not care that his daughter had been exploited for hundreds of thousands of dollars. He just wanted the noise to stop. He wanted me to return to my role as the silent shock absorber so he could go back to watching football without screaming in the background. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the text and added it to the digital folder labeled harassment. Then, the email arrived. It was from Gavin. Unlike my mother's hysteria or my father's pleading, Gavin's email was cold. It was the email of a man who was trying to figure out if he had been scammed. Subject clarification regarding 42 Oak Creek Lane. Colette, I am writing this to get clarity on what happened at dinner. There was a lot of shouting, and I want to look at the facts. Tessa has always told me that the house was in a family trust, and that the money I gave her every month was going into a new house fund that you were managing for us as an investment. She said you were handling the portfolio. I have transferred roughly $2,500 to Tessa's personal account every month for the last 18 months. She told me this was being forwarded to you for the equity build. Total is around $45,000. Please confirm if you hold these funds and if they will be returned to me upon the sale of the house. Gavin. I stared at the screen. $45,000. Gavin had been paying rent. Or rather, he thought he had been paying into an investment. He had been giving the money to Tessa, believing she was sending it to me or a savings account. But I had never seen a dime. Tessa had been collecting $2,500 a month from her fiancé, claiming it was for the future, and she had spent it. She had spent it on the designer clothes, the brunches, the influencer lifestyle she projected online. She had stolen from me by not paying rent, and she had stolen from him by embezzling his contributions. I felt a strange, cold pity for Gavin. He was arrogant. Yes, he was entitled. Yes, but he was also a mark, just like me. I did not write a long explanation. I did not offer sympathy. I followed Renee's advice documents only. I hit reply. I attached 3 files. Deed_42, oakcreek.pdf, showing I was the sole owner. Payment_history_affidavit.pdf. The spreadsheet showing 0 incoming funds from anyone other than me. Listing_agreement.pdf. In the body of the email, ... I wrote exactly 2 sentences, ... Gavin, ... I have never received any funds from you, ... Tessa, ... or any entity associated with you in the last 24 months. I am the sole owner of the property. There is no trust, and there is no investment fund managed by me. I hit send. I sat there and watched the steam rise from my tea. I counted the minutes. I knew exactly what was happening on the other end of that email. Gavin was reading it on his phone. He was opening the attachments. He was seeing the zeros on the spreadsheet. He was realizing that the $45,000 he thought was a down payment on a mansion in Cherry Creek was actually hanging in Tessa's closet or sitting on her vanity table. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was not a message to me. It was a notification from the family group chat, the one they usually use to exclude me, but had forgotten to remove me from. Tessa left the conversation. Gavin left the conversation. I imagined the scene. The shouting match at Oak Creek Lane right now would make the dinner scene look like a tea party. Gavin was not a man who took financial loss lightly. Tessa had lost her shield. She could not blame me for this. She could not say Colette is greedy when Gavin asked where his $45,000 went. That was between him and her. I had simply turned on the lights. I was not responsible for the mess they found in the room. Half an hour later, a text came through from Aunt June. June. Just left the house. It is World War III. Gavin is packing a bag. He asked your dad if he knew Tessa was skimming the money. Your dad looked like he was going to have a stroke. Tessa is locked in the bathroom screaming that you hacked her accounts. I typed back, "Are you okay, June?" "I am fine. I told your parents the truth before I walked out. I told them. You two used Colette as an insurance policy for 30 years. You thought she would never cancel the coverage. Well, The policy just expired. Deal with the damages yourselves. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in weeks. June, watch your back. Kid, Tessa is cornered. She is going to try something nasty. She kept screaming that she was going to make you pay. She is not sad. She is vengeful. I know. I typed, I am ready. I left the coffee shop and drove to my apartment in the city. When I walked inside, the silence of my own space felt different. It was not lonely. It was fortified. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I had one more layer of defense to build. I drafted a mass email to the extended family, the aunts, cousins, and friends who had been at the dinner. I knew Tessa would try to spin a narrative that I was abandoning a pregnant woman. I needed to preempt the gossip. Subject update on 42 Oak Creek Lane. Dear family, there seems to be some confusion regarding the sale of my property in Centennial. To prevent misinformation, I am clarifying that the house has been fully funded, maintained, and owned solely by me for 2 years. Despite my request for the occupants to find alternative housing arrangements over the last few months, no action was taken. I have provided a 30-day legal notice for the family to relocate. I wish Tessa and Gavin the best in finding a home that suits their growing family and their budget. I will not be discussing this further. Best, Colette. It was cold. It was corporate. It was perfect. I spent the rest of the evening locking down everything. I changed the locks on my apartment door. Just in case Tessa still had an old spare key I had forgotten about, I called my office building security and gave them a list of names: Tessa, Gavin, my parents, and instructed that they were not to be allowed up to my floor under any circumstances. My phone continued to buzz with missed calls from unknown numbers, probably friends of Tessa calling to harass me. I did not answer. Around 9 in the evening, I received one final message from Tessa. It was not via text, because I had blocked her. It was an email sent from a new address she must have just created. Subject: You are dead to me. You think you are so smart with your receipts and your lawyer. You think you can just humiliate me and walk away? You have no idea what you just started. You ruined my gender reveal. You ruined my life. I am going to make sure everyone knows who you really are. You are going to wish you had just bought the damn house. I read it twice. You are going to wish you had just bought the damn house. She still did not get it. She still thought this was about money. She thought that if she threatened me enough, if she made the cost of resistance too high, I would pull out my checkbook just to make it stop. She did not realize that the currency had changed. I was not trading in dollars anymore. I was trading in self-respect, and the exchange rate for that was infinite. I forwarded Tessa's email to Renee, added to the file. I typed, evidence of threats. I closed my laptop. I poured myself a glass of wine, a bottle I had bought for myself, paid for with my money, consumed in my home. The fallout was toxic. Yes, the fracture was permanent. My parents were likely crying in a house filled with boxes, wondering where they went wrong, blaming me for their failure to plan. Gavin was likely realizing he was tied to a woman who viewed him as a wallet. Tessa was plotting her revenge, but for the first time in my life. Their chaos was not my emergency. It was just noise on the other side of a very thick, very expensive wall. And I had the only key. The days following Thanksgiving were not a period of cooling down. They were a period of frantic, desperate fortification, if the dinner had been the explosion. The week that followed was the sound of the enemy scrambling through the rubble, looking for a weapon, any weapon to fire back. I had expected anger. I had expected guilt trips. But Tessa, true to her nature, decided to try a different tactic first. She tried to trap me in a cage made of paper. 3 days after the dinner, an email arrived in my inbox. It was not from Tessa's personal account, nor was it from a lawyer. It was from a generic legal template website service. The subject line read, Proposed Settlement and Family Preservation Agreement. I opened the attachment. It was a 5-page document that Tessa must have spent all night drafting, using legal buzzwords she had likely found on a forum for tenants' rights. The document acknowledged that I was the owner of the property on Oak Creek Lane, but it proposed a binding resolution. The terms were laughable. Clause 1 stated that the current occupants, Tessa, Gavin, and our parents would be granted a lease for life, with a fixed rent of $500 a month. $500. The market rate for that house was nearly $4,000. Clause 2 stated that I, the landlord, would remain responsible for all major repairs, taxes, and insurance, but would be prohibited from entering the premises without a 7-day written notice approved by the head tenant, listed as Tessa. Clause 3 was the clincher. It stated that in exchange for this generous rent, I would agree to sign over 50% of the equity in the home to Tessa's future children, to be held in a trust managed, of course, by Tessa. She was not asking for a truce. She was asking me to sign a document that would effectively strip me of my asset and turn me into a permanent servant to her whims. She called it a family preservation agreement. I called it a confession of insanity. I forwarded the document to Renee immediately with a note, "For your amusement." Renee called me 10 minutes later. I could hear the dryness in her voice. "I have seen some bad contracts in my time, Colette," she said. "But this is special. If you signed this, you would essentially be donating the house to her and paying her to live there. It is a trap. She wants you to acknowledge her tenancy rights in writing. If you negotiate this, even a little, she can claim you accepted her status as a long-term tenant." "I am not signing it," I said. "I am not even replying to it." "Good," Renee said. "Because since the honey trap failed, the vinegar is coming next." Renee was right. When 48 hours passed without my signature on her ridiculous treaty, Tessa shifted gears. The emails stopped being pseudo-legal and started becoming manic. She sent a text from a burner number. Since I had blocked her main one, "You are stealing our home." I spoke to a lawyer friend. "We have rights. It is called constructive trust. You promised Mom and Dad this was their house. That is a verbal contract. If you try to sell, I will sue you for fraud. I will report you to the IRS for unreported gift income. I will make sure you spend more on lawyers than you make on the sale." I read the text while sitting in my office at Crown Ridge. The thread about the IRS was particularly funny, given that I had declared every penny, and they were the ones hiding Gavin's income, but the threat of a lawsuit for constructive trust was annoying. It was a baseless claim, but in real estate, even a baseless claim can act like a wrench in the gears. I called Renee again. "She is using words like constructive trust now." "She is Googling," Renee said, her voice turning sharp. "She is looking for a way to file a lis pendens." "A what?" "A lis pendens," Renee explained. "It is a notice of a pending lawsuit filed against a property. If she files one, it alerts potential buyers that there is a claim on the title. No title company will insure the transaction, and no buyer will close until it is cleared. It is the nuclear option for angry relatives. It blocks the sale." My stomach tightened. Can she do that? Even if she has no case? Anyone can file a lawsuit. Colette, having it thrown out takes time. And time is what she wants. She wants to drag this out until the triplets are born, hoping no judge will evict 3 infants in the middle of winter. So how do we stop her? "We tighten the net," Renee said. "We prepare a motion to dismiss before she even files. We compile a summary of facts that is so overwhelming that if any lawyer looks at it, they will tell her she is walking into a massacre. We need to prove that not only is there no trust, but that the relationship was purely financial parasitism." We spent the next 2 days building the counter-strike dossier. Renee drafted a sworn affidavit for me to sign. It detailed every single interaction regarding the house. We attached the bank statements again, but this time, Renee had her forensic accountant annotate them. We highlighted the gift letters my parents had signed when I bought the house standard mortgage documents, where they certified that any money they gave which was zero was a gift, not a loan, and that they had no interest in the property. They had signed those papers without reading them 2 years ago, just to get the loan approved. Now, those signatures were the iron bars of their cage. We also added a new section, Evidence of Bad Faith. This included the family agreement Tessa had just sent, showing she was trying to coerce me into an unconscionable contract. It included the threats of extortion. "If she files a lien," Renee told me, We file for slander of title. We countersue for damages, legal fees, and lost value, and we name Gavin as a co-defendant. That usually wakes the husbands up. While Renee sharpened the legal knives, I decided to do one thing that had nothing to do with the law and everything to do with the fact that I was still, unfortunately, a human being with a conscience. I was not worried about Tessa. She was a survivor, in the way a cockroach is a survivor. But my father was sick, and my mother, for all her faults, was elderly and prone to panic. I did not want them sleeping in a car. I sat down at my computer and did the research they were too entitled to do for themselves. I looked up rental listings in their area actual, affordable rentals, 2-bedroom apartments, townhouses with ground floor access for my father's needs. I made a list of 5 properties that were available immediately and fit within the pension checks I knew they received. Then I went a step further. I contacted the County Agency on Aging. I downloaded the forms for utility assistance and medical transport services programs my father qualified for, but my mother was too proud to apply for. I compiled it all into a PDF. I did not add a note saying, "I love you." I did not add a note saying, "I am sorry." I just added a cover page that read, "Housing and Support Resources." I emailed it to my mother. It was not money. It was not a house. It was a map. I was showing them the exit door and giving them the directions to safety. Whether they chose to walk through it was up to them. I was done carrying them. I was only willing to point the way. The response to my email came 4 hours later. But not from my mother. It came from Gavin. It seemed that my previous email to him, the one with the spreadsheet showing the zero balance, had finally detonated inside the house on Oak Creek Lane. Subject RRE clarification. Colette, I have spent the last 2 days going through our joint accounts. I found the transfers. Tessa didn't send them to you. She was moving them to a secondary account I didn't know about, and then spending it on credit card bills. I found charges for the baby moon trip to Napa that she told me her parents paid for. I found charges for the nursery furniture she said was a gift from a sponsor. I found charges for a storage unit I didn't know we had, full of stuff she bought and never used. She lied to me. She told me we were building a future. She was just burning cash. I am moving out. I am staying at a hotel near my work. I just wanted you to know that I am not part of whatever legal mess she is threatening you with. I am done. Please do not include me in the eviction suit. I will be gone by Sunday. I read the email and felt a heavy, cold satisfaction. The coalition had fractured. Tessa had lost her financier. Without Gavin's income, she had no hope of sustaining even a rental, let alone a lawsuit. She was alone on the island she had built, and the water was rising fast. I did not reply to Gavin. He did not deserve a gold star for finally noticing his fiancée was a grifter. He was a casualty of war, and I walked past casualties. The next evening, the doorbell rang at my apartment. I checked the camera feed on my phone. It was my mother. She was standing in the hallway, clutching a large Tupperware container. It was insulated, likely holding a casserole. She looked small in the grainy video. Her coat buttoned up to her chin, her face pale and drawn. She looked like a sweet, confused old lady. I knew better. This was the Trojan casserole. This was her classic move. When logic failed, when guilt failed, she resorted to physical proximity and food. She believed that if she could just get into my living room, if she could just make me smell her cooking, the daughter programming would reactivate. I would eat the lasagna, I would cry, and I would sign the check. I walked to the door. I did not unlock it. I kept the heavy security chain engaged. I opened the door 2 inches. "Colette," my mother said, her face lighting up with a desperate hope when she saw me. "Oh, thank God. It is freezing out here. Can I come in? I made your favorite, cheesy potato bake." The smell wafted through the crack. It smelled like childhood. It smelled like the days before I knew I was a bank account. "You cannot come in, Mom," I said. Her smile faltered. "What, Colette? Do not be silly. It is me. I drove 40 minutes. I just want to talk. I want to see how you are." "I am fine," I said. "But you cannot come in." "I brought dinner," she said, lifting the container slightly, as if it were a passport. I have dinner, I said. Colette, please, she whispered, and the tears started. They were real tears this time, tears of exhaustion and fear. Your father is a mess. Tessa is... I do not even know who she is anymore. Gavin left. He just packed a bag and left. We are falling apart. We need you. Just let me in. Let us just sit down and figure this out. It would have been so easy. It would have been so easy to slide the chain off. Let her in, eat the potatoes, and fix it. I could write a check for $10,000. I could rent them an apartment for a year. I could make the pain stop. But I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched her husband take my college fund and give it to my sister. I looked at the woman who had hidden the eviction notice. I looked at the woman who had tricked me into buying a house so she could play happy family. If I let her in, I would never get her out. I sent you the list of apartments. Mom, I said. Did you look at them? Apartments? She scoffed, wiping her eyes. Those places, Colette, they are tiny. One of them is in a complex for poor people. It is an income-restricted community for seniors, I corrected her. It is nice, it is safe, and it is what you can afford. We cannot live like that, she said, her voice hardening. We are accustomed to a certain standard. You are accustomed to my standard, I said. And that standard is no longer available. I started to close the door. Colette, she shouted, jamming her foot in the gap. Do not you dare close this door on your mother. After everything I did for you, I raised you, I sacrificed for you. You raised me to be a resource, I said, looking down at her boot. Please move your foot, Mom, or I will call building security. She stared at me. She saw something in my eyes that she had never seen before. She saw the absolute, terrifying absence of guilt. Slowly, she pulled her foot back. You are cold, she spat out. You are ice cold. I had to be, I said, to survive this winter. I shut the door. I heard the click of the lock. I heard the heavy thud of the deadbolt. I stood there for a moment, listening to her footsteps retreat down the hall. I did not cry. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. The next morning, Renee called. It is set, she said. We have a closing date. The buyers wanted to move fast. They are cash buyers, investors who want to flip the property. They do not care about the energy of the house. They care about the square footage. When, I asked? December 28th, Renee said. That gives us exactly 29 days from the notice. We are cutting it close, but it is legal. What about Tessa? She has gone quiet, Renee said, which means she is out of options. Gavin leaving took the wind out of her sails. She has no money for a lawyer. She has no husband to fund her war. She is just a loud noise in an empty room now. She will not leave quietly, I said. She will try one last thing. She will try to burn it down. Let her try, Renee said. We have the fire extinguishers ready, but Colette, you need to be prepared. Closing day is not just signatures, it is the physical handover. You are going to have to walk through that house one last time to verify vacancy. You are going to have to see the wreckage. I know, I said. Are you ready for that? I looked at the empty space of my apartment, the clean lines, the silence that I had bought and paid for. I have been ready for 2 years, I said. Thanksgiving had been the announcement. The emails and the legal threats had been the skirmish, but the war was not over. The war would end on the 28th of December, in a title company conference room, with the scratch of a pen. I hung up the phone. I walked over to my calendar on the wall. I took a red marker and circled the 28th. I did not write closing day. I wrote Freedom Day. And then I went back to work. Because unlike my sister, I had bills to pay. And for the first time in my life, every single one of them was mine. The 24th of December is usually reserved for eggnog, last-minute wrapping paper panic, and carols about peace on earth. For me. It was reserved for a process server and a panic attack. We were 4 days away from the closing date. The buyers, A group of investors looking to flip the property in the spring had their cash ready. The title company had the paperwork printed. The movers were scheduled to arrive at Oak Creek Lane on the 27th. I had almost allowed myself to believe it was over. I had almost allowed myself to exhale. Then, Tessa played her final card. At 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Renee called me. She did not say hello. "She filed," Renee said. Her voice was clipped, the tone of a general reporting a breach in the line. "She went down to the county clerk this morning and filed a lis pendens, claiming an equitable interest in the property based on a verbal partnership agreement. She is claiming that you were merely a trustee and that the sale is a fraudulent conveyance designed to deprive her and her unborn children of their rightful asset." I felt the blood drain from my face. Can she do that? She has no proof. She does not need proof to file, Colette. She just needs a form and a filing fee. She knows she cannot win the lawsuit, but she knows that a lis pendens clouds the title. The title insurance company will not issue a policy with a pending claim. The buyers will walk away. She is trying to run out the clock. She is trying to kill the sale, I said. She is trying to force you to settle, Renee corrected. She thinks that if she threatens the deal, you will pay her $50,000 to go away just to save the sale. It is a shakedown. I am not paying her, I said. The anger that rose in my throat was hot and metallic. I will burn the house to the ground before I write her a check. Do not burn anything, Renee said. We are going to court. I have already called the emergency judge, because this involves a potential eviction and an imminent real estate closing, and because her filing is so obviously frivolous, I managed to get us an emergency hearing for the morning of the 26th, Boxing Day. Boxing Day, I repeated. Fitting. Get your suit ready, Renee said, and bring the binder. We are going to end this. The morning of the 26th was gray and bitingly cold. The courthouse was mostly empty, staffed only by a skeleton crew of bailiffs who looked annoyed to be working the day after Christmas. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Renee. My hands were folded on the mahogany surface. I looked across the aisle. Tessa was there. She was wearing a maternity dress that I recognized I had paid for it 3 months ago. She looked haggard, her eyes puffy, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was playing the role of the exhausted, persecuted mother perfectly. Beside her sat a lawyer who looked like he had been hired from a billboard advertisement on the highway. He had an ill-fitting suit and a nervous tic in his left eye. My parents were in the gallery behind her. My mother was clutching a tissue. My father was staring at his knees. They looked small. They looked like people who had boarded a train thinking it was going to a party, only to realize too late it was heading off a cliff. The judge. A woman named Judge Holloway with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense expression swept into the room. All right, Judge Holloway said, shuffling the files. We are here on an emergency motion to expunge a lis pendens regarding the property at 42 Oak Creek Lane. I have read the filings. Let us make this quick. I have a holiday weekend to get back to. Tessa's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client asserts that there was a verbal contract. The defendant, Ms. Murphy, agreed to hold the title in trust for the family. My client has invested sweat equity, significant funds, and relies on this home for her high-risk pregnancy involving triplets. To evict her now would be a gross miscarriage of justice. Tessa let out a sob. It was loud, wet, and timed perfectly to punctuate her lawyer's sentence. Judge Holloway looked at Tessa over her glasses. She did not look moved. She looked bored. Ms. Caldwell, the judge said, nodding to Renee. Renee stood up. She did not use big words. She did not shout. She simply picked up a single piece of paper. Your Honor, there is no trust. There is no partnership. There is only a deed, which lists my client as the sole owner. There is a mortgage, paid exclusively by my client. And as for the significant funds the plaintiff claims to have invested, we have prepared a forensic accounting of the household finances. Renee walked to the bench and handed the file to the bailiff. This document details every payment made on the house for 24 months. Every cent came from Colette Murphy. The plaintiff has contributed $0 in rent, $0 in maintenance, and $0 in taxes. This filing is a malicious tactic to obstruct a lawful sale. Tessa stood up, ignoring her lawyer's hand on her arm. I made that house a home, she screamed. I am carrying 3 babies. Does that count for nothing? She is kicking out her own nieces or nephews. Judge Holloway banged the gavel. It was a sharp, wooden crack that silenced the room. Ma'am, sit down, the judge ordered. Biology does not supersede property law. Being pregnant does not create a deed. If it did, maternity wards would be real estate brokerages. Tessa slumped back into her chair, her face turning a blotchy red. However, the judge continued, looking at Renee, the plaintiff claims she gave money to her fiancé, Mr. Gavin Dressler, which was intended for the mortgage. If there is ambiguity about where that money went, there might be a question of fact regarding an implied contract. This was the trap. If the judge decided there was even a question, she could delay the sale for months to allow for discovery. Renee smiled. It was a terrifying smile. We anticipated that, Your Honor, Renee said, which is why we have submitted a sworn affidavit from Mr. Gavin Dressler himself. Tessa's head snapped up. My parents gasped. Renee pulled out a document. Mr. Dressler contacted our office yesterday. In this affidavit, he states under penalty of perjury that he gave the plaintiff, Tessa Murphy, approximately $45,000 over 18 months, with the specific instruction to pay the defendant for equity in the home. He further states that he has since discovered that the plaintiff never transferred these funds to the owner, nor did she save them. He has provided credit card statements showing the funds were used for luxury goods, travel, and personal expenses by the plaintiff. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Tessa looked like she had been struck by lightning. She turned to look at the doors, as if expecting Gavin to walk in and save her. But Gavin was gone. He had cut his losses. He had chosen the side of the truth, or at least, the side that wouldn't get him sued. He further states, Renee continued, driving the final nail into the coffin, that due to this financial deception, he has terminated his engagement to the plaintiff and has removed himself from the residence. That is a lie, Tessa shrieked. He loves me. He would never. The affidavit is notarized, Your Honor, Renee said calmly. The plaintiff lied to her fiancé. She lied to her sister. And now she is lying to this court. Judge Holloway read the document. She took a long time. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like a bomb countdown. Finally, the judge looked up. Her eyes were hard. Motion to expunge the lis pendens is granted, she ruled. The claim is baseless and was filed in bad faith. The sale may proceed. She looked at Tessa. And frankly, Ms. Murphy, you should be grateful the defendant is not suing you for back rent. If you file another motion to delay this sale, I will hold you in contempt of court. Get out of my courtroom. Case closed, the bailiff announced. I stood up. I felt lightheaded. It was over. We walked out into the hallway. My parents were waiting there. They looked shell-shocked. My mother reached out and grabbed my arm. Her grip was weak, trembling. Colette, she said. Her voice was a whisper. Please, the judge said. But we have nowhere to go. The movers are coming tomorrow. We cannot just leave. My father stepped forward. He looked old. Just give us a few months. Honey, call the buyers. Tell them there is a delay. You can pay the mortgage for a little longer, just until the babies are born. We are family. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had stood by while Tessa tried to steal my property. I looked at the people who had watched me work myself into the ground for a decade and called it lucky. No, I said. Colette, be reasonable, my mother cried. You have so much money. You have your whole life ahead of you. Why are you punishing us over a few dollars? It is not a few dollars, Mom, I said. And it is not about the money. I looked her in the eye. I gave you my 20s, I said. I gave you my savings. I gave you my credit score. I gave you my peace of mind. I have paid for my seat at this table with my entire youth. That is enough. The tab is closed. I pulled my arm out of her grip. I sent you the list of the senior apartments, I said to my father. I called the manager at the one on Elm Street. He is expecting you. He has a unit ready. It is small, but it is clean, and it costs exactly what your pension pays. We cannot live in a senior home, my mother spat. What about Tessa? Tessa is an adult, I said. She can figure it out, just like I had to. I turned and walked away. I walked down the long marble corridor of the courthouse, my heels clicking on the floor. I did not look back. I knew that if I looked back, I might turn into a pillar of salt, or worse, a daughter. 2 days later, the closing took place. I did not go to the house. I signed the papers at the title company office downtown. I signed my name 30 times. With every signature, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. When the final document was signed, the title officer handed me a check. It was for the net proceeds of the sale. Even after paying off the mortgage and the broker fees, the check was for over $200,000. The market had gone up. The improvements, the ones I had paid for, had increased the value. I looked at the check. It was not just money, it was reimbursement. It was an apology from the universe. Renee walked me to the elevator. They are out, she said. The broker did the final walkthrough an hour ago. The house is empty. They left a mess, some trash, some old furniture they did not want, but they are gone. The locks have been changed. Where did they go? I asked. Your parents took the apartment on Elm Street, Renee said. Your dad realized he had no choice. As for Tessa, she is staying with a friend from her church. Just for a few days. Apparently, she is posting a lot about being a martyr. Let her post, I said. I blocked her. You did good. Colette, Renee said, shaking my hand. Most people cave. You stood tall. I had a good lawyer, I said. I left the building and drove home. My new home. It was a townhouse in the city, in a quiet neighborhood lined with brick buildings and old trees. I parked my car in my garage, where only my car was parked. I walked up the steps and unlocked the front door. I stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of nothing but cleanliness. There was no smell of roasting turkey. There was no smell of tension. There were no voices arguing in the kitchen. There were no eyes watching me, calculating what I could give them. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window and watched the snow begin to fall outside. My phone was on the counter. It was silent. I had set it to do not disturb for everyone except Renee and my work contacts. I thought about my family. I knew they were struggling right now. I knew my mother was complaining about the size of her new kitchen. I knew Tessa was spinning a story to anyone who would listen about how her evil sister threw her out in the snow. I knew my father was missing his big recliner. I felt a twinge of sadness, a phantom pain where the limb used to be. But underneath the sadness was something stronger, something solid. I was safe. I had drawn a line in the sand. And when the tide came in, I had not washed away. I had built a seawall. I took a sip of water. It tasted like freedom. I walked over to the front door and turned the deadbolt. Click. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a quiet apartment in New York, a busy commute in London, or somewhere else entirely? Please let me know in the comments below. I love reading about where my community is from. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about people taking their power back, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Emma Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this video can reach more people who might need a little inspiration to draw their own boundaries. Stay strong, and remember, you are not a bank account. You are a person.